Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, this is Andrew Prokop. Welcome to the last in our series of emerging technology webinars. We are going to restart the series, so just pay attention, look for an email that gives you information on how to register. I hope you enjoyed the ones that we did so far. I personally did. This is my third, so hopefully you listened to those. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence and natural language processing. I'm going to spend a little more time on natural language processing, which is kind of a family member of artificial intelligence, and it's really the area that I want to emphasize in terms of building applications and integrating NLP into your enterprise processes. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on that, and hopefully give you some really good real-life examples of how it works, what it does, and how you can use it. So I don't want to get, I tend to get a little geeky, people that know me, a little nerdy on things, but I really don't want to get too deep in the weeds on most of this. So a lot of this is going to be high-level concepts, going to show you how applications are built. I'm going to introduce you to three of some of the biggest players in the space, IBM, Amazon, and then Facebook with their WIT product, and let you see how those applications are built and talk about the technology to help you feel comfortable with this technology. And for those of you that have already asked, this is being recorded, and you will receive a link of the playback not too long after we finished up. And it's also, we post these on YouTube. So currently right now, if you go to the Aero Systems Integration YouTube channel, there's a playlist with all of the webinars we've given so far, and this one will be included in that playlist. So again, Andrew Prokop, let's get going. So, okay, so I want to start with a few Gartner predictions. A lot of people follow Gartner for very good reason. They are often at the forefront of a lot of technology and give enterprises, businesses, some kind of a crystal ball into where things are going. And so I dug around and I pulled a few things, some quotes and some predictions from their, they have an article actually called Predicts 2017 Artificial Intelligence. So this first one here, so by 2019, more than 10% of IT hires in customer service will mostly write scripts for bot interactions. And this one really kind of caught me off guard. 10%. So obviously integrating IT and natural language processing, which is what bots are based on, you're going to see that, is Gartner thinks is going to be a huge part or a growing part of every customer service department. So this one here, through 2020, organizations using cognitive ergonomics and system design in new artificial intelligence projects will achieve long-term success 4 times more often than others. So they're basically telling you you are going to be more successful with your projects if you start to adopt this technology and build this into your business. So by 2020, 20% of companies will dedicate workers to monitor and guide neural networks. Neural networks are really, the most simplistic way is machines that think like human beings, things that act like human beings. So 20% of companies will dedicate workers to this technology by 2020. Well, the last I looked, it's 2018, so this is 2020 is just around the corner. And then by 2019, the startups will overtake the big players, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, in driving artificial intelligence. So a lot of what you're seeing today and what I'm going to talk about, I'm talking about the big players, but I'm also looking at the startups and the folks that nobody's heard about and what they're doing. And so this prediction is that really they, with some of the really amazing things that are coming out of these startups, will overtake what's in existence today. I think that's a very interesting statement. So not only is it disruptive to businesses, AI and NLP, but it's also disruptive to the people that are producing AI and NLP. So kind of an interesting, that last one I find very interesting. So let's look at the way that we've done things in the past. So we all do Google searches. I do Google searches all the time. What I try and do is I have an answer. I have a question that I want to have answered. Like, for instance, I've been working on writing some software that ties into something called MQTT, which is message queuing telemetry transport. It's the way to go to an IoT service and pull data from the IoT service in real time. So I wanted to write some code that used this. So I sat down at my PC and I started with the word Java because I want to get some Java code, and I want to use MQTT, so of course Java, MQTT, and then I put after that things like examples or some other things, jar file, because I want to get some package or library that I can use. So I send this off to Google. What Google does, so I'm determining what my keywords are. What am I trying to get? Send that off to my search engine. It comes back with a whole bunch of links. Now it's up to me to determine which of these links. So there is some processing on the Google end where they're going to try and give me what they think are the most relevant links, or what they're paid, what people are paying to have me see as their most relevant links. So that information comes back to me, but it's up to me now to read through this information, determine what's useful and what's not useful. So I might start at the top and I go, no, this isn't what I want. I go back, look at the next one. Okay, this is a little bit better, but it doesn't really say all that I want. Maybe I get to the third one and go, okay, this one's pretty good. If I combine what was in the third one and what was in the second one, now I have my answer. So this is what we've typically done in the past, sort of the search model. But let's look at now the AI model. So instead of me distilling all these keywords down, I might come up with a phrase that says, I'm looking for a Java library that implements MQTT. So this goes off to my expert system, who understands the question that I just asked. So there are some keywords in that, and I will talk about that when we get into how to dissect how a natural language processing system works. So there's some keywords, but it's really looking at the entire phrase, and I'm speaking the way that I would speak to a coworker. I talk to another programmer and say, hey, blah, 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 blah. I'm not saying this in 3 words, Java, MQTT examples. I'm giving a full English sentence. So what the natural language processing or AI system does is it goes off and understands the question, and then it starts to produce possible answers. Now it analyzes the answers, and then it finally gives back to me what I've asked for. So not necessarily a whole bunch of choices, maybe, and I'll talk about that in a bit, how NLP might give you some choices. But the whole point is it's trying to do the thinking for you and trying to do the analysis and come back to you with the answer that you're really looking for, and not give you a whole bunch of choices that you have to decipher through. So natural language processing, this is a pretty technical definition. I dug this one up. I probably found it on Wikipedia. But the whole point of really natural language processing is to analyze, understand, and generating the languages that humans use. So when I give a question or statement into my natural language processing engine, I want it to analyze it, understand it, and then give me English back. So when we get into the talk about how we build text bots and how we incorporate this technology into our business processes, this is really what we're trying to do. I want to have a machine that I can talk to, but I don't want to know that I'm talking to a machine. So if I build some kind of a text bot or chat bot, and I'm running a business, Acme Plumbing, and I have people chatting with me, I don't want them to know that they're talking to a machine. So I want it to come back in a language that I use, proper syntax, proper grammar, so that I feel, me as the customer feels that I'm talking to a person and not to a machine. Now, NLP, it has its own bunch of terms. And so if you were to start to look at natural language processing, you'll see all these things, stemming and tokenization and normalization. But I try to distill that down into what I think are 3 of the most important concepts. And these are the ones that are going to get you just about everything that you need. So when we get into building the applications, if you understand what an intent is, you understand what an entity is and what a dialogue is, you'll be able to use any of the packages that I'm going to talk about today and the packages I'm not going to talk about today, because they're all really based on these three big things. Now, a lot of the other stuff occurs under the covers. You don't necessarily see it. You will see intents, entities, and dialogues. So anyone that's as old as me will know that there are 50 ways to leave your lover. Because, of course, you slip out the back, Jack. You make a new plan, Stan. You don't need to be coy, Roy. You just listen to me. You hop on the bus, Gus. You don't need to discuss much. You just drop off the key, Lee, and get yourself free. Now, the whole point of that was not so I can sing on a webinar, which I am sure is the first time I've ever done that, and I didn't really sing that much or that well. The whole point is that there are lots of different ways to ask for the same thing. So it's not just we as a human species, we have exactly one way to ask a question and exactly one way to answer that question. And again, as Paul Simon said, there must be 50 ways to leave your lover. But let's say that we're actually doing some application for package delivery. So how many different ways can somebody ask about when will my package be delivered? So, of course, when will my package be delivered? When can I expect my package? Will my order arrive today? So notice in the first two I had package. The third one, I don't even have the word package, but I'm still looking for the same thing. I need to know when my order will be shipped. Has my package shipped? I'm calling about my recent order, and I can go on and on and on and on, many more than 50 ways to ask about a package. Oh, and I just saw a great comment. Best singing I've ever heard on a webinar. Well, Dave, I bet you it's the only singing you've ever heard on a webinar, and probably the only one you'll ever want to hear from me. So anyway, so I'm going through and I'm asking all these different ways. And what really is happening is I have an intention of delivery query. I'm asking about my order, my shipment, my package, and I want to know when will it arrive. So me, as an NLP designer, I can say, well, all these different things really are coming down to this one thing, delivery query. And when you build an NLP application, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into the actual programs, you will define an intent. And an intent will then be trained. So again, I would enter all of these different questions in there to train my system. Now, a lot of intents are already pre-built. So the systems have a lot of pre-built intents that you can use, but if you're building your custom application and it doesn't have one of these intents, well then you would create your own intent and you would train it. And again, in this case, it's delivery query. So what is an intent? Well, it's really the intention of the text or the spoken or written dialogue on the behalf of the consumer, the customer, the user of this service. So again, what is the intention of this? Think about sentence diagramming. If you were like me and you grew up in a traditional American grade school system and high school as well, we did sentence diagramming where you take a sentence, the quick brown fox jumped over, and then we would break down that into what the subject was, what was the verb, the predicates, the pronouns, the adjectives, and those sorts of things, and we would diagram the sentence out. Well, intents are a lot like that. So we're taking that sentence and we're breaking it down into the components. So I come down to, again, what is the effect? What is the person looking for with this? Again, you can ask it 50 different ways, but it all comes down to the same thing: I want to leave my lover. So you have two kinds of intents: casual intents. Those are things like hello, goodbye, thank you. Kind of like, I don't want to say placeholders, but they don't necessarily move the bot along as much as, when will my package be delivered? And then it will come back and say, oh, I need to do something with that. Well, that's a business intent. And a business intent is really an intent that maps to the actual business of the bot. And I use the word bot pretty freely with application and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of you could understand the term bot. So the sort of programmatic robot thing that is going to respond to you in terms of, again, your request. So a business intent is an intent that maps to the actual business of the bot. So when will my package be delivered? Well, I could call that the intent is delivery query. When do you open? Well, the intent could be hours query. And again, I can have 50, 60, 100 different ways to ask, when will you be open? Are you open tomorrow? Are you open till 3? Are you open past noon? Blah, blah, blah. Those are hours query. The intent is really somebody's asking about the hours of a business. And again, the word hours query or the intent, that's my creation. I could have named it anything I want, but the whole point is I'm trying to categorize these questions into something specific, and that specific thing is called an intent. The next thing are entities. And think of an entity as the metadata for an intent. So an intent, again, is a specific question or specific statement, the distillation of what does that mean. And then the entity are sort of the metadata, the things that float around it. Like, let's look at this sentence again. Will my package be delivered today? Well, my parser can come back and say, well, the intent, again, is a delivery query. Somebody's asking about the delivery of a package. But I have an entity in there, and I can call this the time of day entity. Now, this could either be one of the built-ins into your system, or it can create my own entity, and that is today. So when will my package be delivered drives me to delivery query. The entity is today. So I might process that differently than if it was a different entity. Will my package be delivered next week? Will my package, or I ask, go away from packages. I have other kinds of things. And I'm going to give you an example in a little bit where I have other kinds of things that make up different kinds of entities. Here's another example, though. Deliver my package to 123 Main Street. Once again, the intent. Well, actually, no, not once again. Here's a new one. Now we're actually doing a delivery request. So we're not asking about the status of a delivery. We are being demonstrative and trying to direct the delivery. So I have a new intent, which is my delivery request. Different than a delivery query, which is asking about the status. This one now is delivery request. I'm telling it to do something. And of course, the entity is a location entity of 123 Main Street. And you can see how that can change over and over and over again, and maybe, again, drive different kind of logic. It might, because one of the things might be you're going from a North American delivery to an international delivery. You're going from a business to a house or to a P.O. box, and maybe you don't deliver to P.O. boxes. So the entities can help drive the intent as well, because I might change this from delivery. It's still a delivery request, but it's going to be processed differently in terms of I can't do that, and then it drives your dialogue perhaps in a very different way. So if we had intents, now we have entities. Now the last thing I want to talk about are dialogues, and one of my favorite episodes from Seinfeld, hopefully you folks saw that, is when Kramer becomes the movie hotline. And it quickly devolved into the point where he couldn't understand DTMF tones. So when people would, he would say, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And of course, he didn't understand it. I think it ended up him basically saying, just tell me what you want to see. The dialogue was what is coming from Kramer. So he was providing the dialogue back to the queries, which were DTMF tones that he could not understand at all. So dialogue, what to say in response to received text. So the received natural language. So I get something in, I want to put something out. So let's go and let's do Kramer's movie hotline. So when is Grumpy Old Men showing? I live in Minnesota, and I love the movie Grumpy Old Men. If you haven't seen it, it really explains what Minnesota is all about. So when is Grumpy Old Men showing? Well, I have an intent, which is the movie request. I have an entity, which is Grumpy Old Men. So somebody is asking about a movie, and here's this specific movie that they are asking about. And the dialogue that I could then program into my bot, and I could pull this information from some back-end database, wherever. Grumpy Old Men is showing today at 4:40, 7 o'clock, and 9:20. Another example, when is Grumpy Old Men showing on Saturday? Same thing, movie request, entity Grumpy Old Men, a second entity. I can have more than one entity for a particular intent. So I have Grumpy Old Men, movie request, but now another entity, Saturday, well, dialogue could be Grumpy Old Men is not showing on Saturday. So the entities working with the intent will drive the dialogue. And you can have multiple dialogues, and I'm going to talk about that when we get into some of the application building. So step by step. So if we want to build one of these things, we're going to go to one of our providers, and I'm going to talk about the providers in just a moment. So we're going to create an account with the provider. So either it's going to be IBM Watson or Amazon Lex or Microsoft, or it's going to be the Facebook WIT.AI, but you need to create an account. Some of them are very simple to create, and you say, sign up with my Facebook account, or let me just create one with my email, or sign up with my GitHub, or something like that. Others are more complicated. You have to put down a credit card. You have to, build, because you're building a real application. They want to have, how do they bill you, blah, 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 blah. We'll talk about that when we get into the different providers. Then you go and you create your application, your workspace, your bot, your system. They all have different kinds of names, but you're really just creating an application, an AI, natural language processing application. Then you do the training of the application. I mentioned this already. So you define your intents, you train them, you would highlight, or the system would point out what the entities are, and you would use those, again, for your special processing. You would create your dialogues, and there's etc. There's some other things that you can do as well. Some of the different providers offer some features the others don't. I'll talk a little bit about that. But you're training your application. You're training your bot just the way that you would train a new hire. And, the way you would say, okay, now when this happens, you do this. And when this happens, you do this. And when this happens, you do that. So you're training your application. One of the cool things is you don't have to give it all 50 ways. You give it just enough, and it's smart enough to say, okay, I get the pattern. I understand what's happening here. And I found that you don't have to do too much to these platforms for them to start understanding things in ways that you never trained it. Some of the ones like WIT, which is really cool, if it doesn't know something, if it's during the processing, it wasn't sure about an answer, it actually puts that into a special place that you as the developer can go back and say, oh, somebody asked this, it wasn't quite sure, and it returned this. Is this what you wanted? And you can know, you can correct it. And so the next time somebody asks that same thing or variation of that same thing, it processes it correctly. And then we want to deploy our application. And so the deploy process is to push the application out however you want to push it out. Sometimes they're regional, sometimes they're worldwide. And then you also acquire your integration data, because for the most cases, these things need to integrate with something. Are you going to integrate your bot with Facebook Messenger? Are you going to integrate it in with Slack? How are you going to integrate it? I'm going to show you how you can integrate it with Breeze and build your own application. So you need to acquire the integration data so that you know how to go from the bot to your application, which is going to front end the bot. And so again, integrating with the different services, blah, blah, blah. So let's actually start talking about one of the platforms. This is actually the second one I did. The first one I worked with was the Facebook platform, and everybody knows about Watson. Everybody's excited about Watson, So I figured I need to go do this one. So it's really a question-answering computer system capable of answering questions posed in natural language. Okay, so it's built to apply natural language processing, information retrieval, knowledge representation, on and on and on, all the stuff I just talked about. This one, actually, I didn't know until I started doing some research. I always thought it was named after Watson, with Watson, come here, I need to see you, with Alexander Bell, but it was actually named after IBM's first CEO, Thomas J. Watson. So I learned something in the process of building this webinar. So Thomas J. Watson is what it's named after. You may have seen Watson. You may have seen Watson on TV. Watson took on the two most winningest, I think it's the word winningest, Jeopardy players and challenged them and actually beat their pants off. It was pretty amazing. It had a bit of a rough start, but eventually it just dominated the game of Jeopardy. And it's really impressive if you watch the playbacks of what happened. It's almost as if you could see it learning in the process. And of course, the folks at IBM did learn quite a bit in the process, and then that was applied into Watson to make it a better product. So Watson has this technology, and when I started putting all this together, it was called Watson Conversation. It's now been moved to Watson Assistant. There's always a marketing department somewhere that just has to rename everything to confuse people like me and to have to go back and rename all my stuff. But right now I'm going to keep calling it Watson Conversation because that's how I started. But it is becoming Watson Assistant. So Watson Conversation is really the way to, with Watson technology, to quickly build and deploy chatbots or virtual agents across a variety of channels, including mobile devices, messaging platforms, and even robots. And you're going to see how you can take that and apply that into your own enterprise. It does require that you have an IBM Bluemix account. So you would go and create an account, and then you would accept all the stuff, and you have to assign a credit card, blah, blah, blah. But one of the really, really cool things about all these platforms is they give you a great way to kick the tires, to be a developer. And they are very liberal with how many requests that you can make and how many responses they come back. And if you get down to the API level, how do you're accessing the APIs without paying a dime. I've never paid a dime for all the work that I've done with any of these guys. So it's a very liberal account. But once you go live and you are really driving good traffic into it, then you will cross over from the threshold of developer into the threshold of you have to pay some money. But it's extremely liberal. You can again, I've never paid a dime for any of this stuff. If you want to find it, and you'll get the playback and you'll see that. But or you could probably just Google. Unfortunately, you can't use natural language processing on your Firefox browser, but you can Google for a Bluemix account, or I think if you just Google Watson Conversation, it will drive you to create a Bluemix account. So they call their bots workspaces, at least they did during the conversation stage. And this is where you can actually go in and you can create a workspace, and you'll start to define your intents into your entities. They come up with one called Card Dashboard, which is a sample that comes automatically. There's another one that I started with, which was my conversation tutorial, and I was actually following the tutorial, so I named it the same thing. And then I created this one here called Package Delivery, and I had a few more others that I created. So Package Delivery. So going back to that slide where I was training it, when will my package arrive? This is what I actually ended up doing, was creating the Package Delivery workspace. Think application or bot. So when you go and do one of these things, and they're all going to be very, very similar, you're going to go in and you're going to train it. You're going to add an intent. And then the intent is going to have questions that you're going to apply to the intent. And often you start with a question, actually. You put in the question, and then it will come back and it will think, well, I think it's this. And if it's one of the built-ins, you go, oh, it is this. And you can accept it and go on, and then you can ask another question. If it's not one of the built-ins, or if you want to be more specific, you can say, no, this is my intent, delivery query. And so I start to train against delivery query, and now it starts to recognize the patterns. And this is what artificial intelligence is all about, understanding the patterns of human speech and intelligently deciphering this stuff. And then I keep assigning this into intents. I can also build entities or use built-in entities, again, like time of day or location, or maybe I'm some sort of retailer, and I have some very specific entities that apply to my services. So I build my own custom entities, and I attach those into to my intents, and then the phrases. And then lastly are the dialogues that I want to have it return when it encounters one of these things. Now, when I get into some of the differences, you'll see there are differences, the way that they each do the dialogues. But with Watson and Conversations, you would, in a sense, create kind of a tree structure. When I hear this, I want to respond back with this. You can have multiple responses, and you can use those multiple responses to answer things in a different way. The tone of the sentiment of the question might drive you to answer things in one way or another thing. And what I mean by tone or sentiment is, am I detecting anger? Is this person becoming upset? Are they not understanding what I'm doing? And maybe I want to answer things in a different way. But there are other reasons why I might want to answer things in a different way. I might want to answer things in a different way because of this particular customer and information I have about this customer, or I might want to answer it in a different way because of the entities are telling me to answer it a different way. So the whole point, though, is you can have multiple kinds of dialogues that get attached into these conversations that get returned back. So intents, entities, dialogues. Remember I pulled those three things out? You'll see these over and over again with all the providers. So the next provider I want to talk about is Amazon Lex. And so any of you that have an Alexa at home, Lex and Alexa are really derivations of lexicon. So Amazon Lex is the technology behind Alexa. It's the thing that is, again, natural language processing, artificial intelligence, and returning data back. So it's an Amazon Web Services service. There's the Department of Redundancy department. AWS service for building conversational interfaces for applications using voice and text. So Amazon Alexa is built on this technology. Well, let's say that you want to build something similar. Well, you would use Lex. So you would go out and you'd create an AWS account and you would start to build Lex bots. So create an AWS account. Now they have some interesting pre-built integrations which with AWS Lambda, allowing integrations with other AWS services. So one of the questions that might come up is, why do I want to use one platform over another? Well, you certainly want to look at the technology and how well they do the natural language processing and the artificial intelligence, but you also want to look at what other things do they provide besides just, building a bot. And so one of the things that Amazon does is they have a lot of other features that you can start to attach in. Okay, so Amazon Lex, so this is what the user interface looks like. And as you can see here, I'm building an intent. It's under the intent section called hours. And then these are some of the things that I use to train it. When are you open? What are your hours? Are you open today? Are you open tomorrow? And so what happens is I can, again, sign those two intents. And this other one, I have location as well. So I built location as an intent as well. And then we would go down and if we want to integrate with other services, things like that. What's really kind of interesting is the way that Amazon works is they allow you different kinds of scenarios to do different kinds of dialogues. But in a sense, you will still build your dialogues. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about Amazon Lex, which is not provided by the other providers, at least today it isn't, are these things called slots. And the way I like to think of a slot is like a variable. And so I built a Lex bot for my phony dental clinic. And I came up with a different list of services that the dentist provides. Now I can define those services as what they call a slot, so that I can use that in my processing, so that I can ask, if somebody's asking for a dental appointment, I can look to see, well, does it fit one of the slots that I have currently defined? So it's like an entity, but a little more interesting in that I can actually take it and I can define my slot and I can put it in as a variable into the question that I'm asking. So it's not simply, I want to schedule an appointment. I want to schedule an appointment for and then the variable, and then depending on the slot that it finds, it can take a different path through my bot execution and return different kinds of responses, or I can have my error response of, I'm sorry, I don't provide that service. So in a sense, it's taking some of the work that I might have to do in my Breeze application, we haven't gotten to Breeze yet, and putting it into the bot itself. So it's pretty neat to do that in this space. You're still having to do it, but there's a really nice, well-built user interface for defining slots. So that's what slots are all about in Amazon Lex. And the next one is called WIT. And WIT is a company that was purchased by Facebook. And I think I might have the year down here. But once again, it's a platform for building text and voice-activated applications. Now, I've been speaking a lot about text and all that, but this is voice as well. You can build voice bots. Of course, now you need to get the voice channel in there. It's much easier to get the text channel than it is to get the voice channel. And so when I get into building applications, I'm going to really spend all my time on text. But it's, again, they all do voice and text. One of the things I thought was really interesting about WIT is they wanted to produce this sort of open source ecosystem. So it allows you to, when you build something that's really clever, movie phone or something like that, and you have your intents and your entities and all that sort of stuff, it allows you to make it an open source or shareable. So you can say, as a developer, let's say you are, the Acme, bowling ball company, and you want to go in, you want to build some kind of bot for, for your bowling balls, is you can go in and see somebody's already built one. And this open source, shareware, freeware community says, oh, somebody already has one. You can look at it and say, oh, I want to use that one, or I want to use it and then augment it, and then return allow people to have the augmented version as well. So it's this open source attitude where they say, hey, we can all do better if we all do better. So they give you the ability to share your bots with the world. Now, your implementation of the bot will be your implementation, and how people get to your bot will be your way. But you don't have to go through the whole bit of defining the intents and the entities and all that. Somebody has done that for you and has been willing to share it with you. So there's the year. So it was acquired by Facebook in 2015. No licenses are required. So unlike unlike Watson, IBM, and unlike AWS, I do not have to create an account and put a credit card. They, for now, and there's nothing on their site that says anything different, they're giving this away. So this is a really fun one to play with. So if you just go to WIT.AI, you can start building your applications today without having to share anything with anybody. No credit card, nothing. And when you do create your application, you're given the ability to make it public or private. So if you don't want to share your bowling ball application, you don't have to, but if somebody's done it for you, well, that saves you a lot of work. So anyway, it's a very interesting model. How is it going to move forward if gazillion people are using it? They have a statement on their webpage that says, if you plan to make a public application and you think it will be high volume, please let us know. Now, I don't know what happens if you let them know. If they say, okay, well, we'll do a guaranteed quality of service, I don't know. In the IBM, the Amazon models, you can do things like that. I don't know what happens, but they basically say, use it, and we'll support you. So interesting model. And so you go to WIT.AI, and then the same sort of things that we've done for everything else is you train it with your intents and your entities, and they have a lot of built-in ones which are really cool, and you can just assign, like there's one called WIT date time, you can see that at the bottom of the screen, and you can just attach that. So you don't have to invent the wheel every single time. You can take advantage of what they've built in, or in their case, again, what other people have built. All right, so that's the foundation of NLP and AI. And there are other technologies we can talk about it, but I'm not going to talk about them because I have to keep this into an hour. But they all do similar things: intents, entities, and dialogues. One of the things I should point out, WIT does not currently do the dialogue. So you're going to have to do the dialogues yourself somewhere else. Where would that somewhere else be? That would be in Breeze. And when I actually show you a bot, I can show you how I would make that different. Okay, so hopefully this is all not new to you, but Engagement Designer, this is the easy way to write Breeze application. So it's a drag and drop interface. It has all sorts of stuff with telephony for making phone calls, blah, blah, blah. Has a lot of stuff in there for notifications with emails, SMS text, and we're going to talk about SMS text because that's pretty important to me and by building my bots. And then you have integration stuff for other things like databases, RESTful web services, things like that. And then work assignment for contact center, so for attribute routing. One of the things I want to point out is you see on all these workflows, they all have this thing called start. If you look at on the canvas, there's that little circle and says start. All workflows or snap-ins begin at start. Well, start can be triggered by any number of different things. It could be manually triggered. It could be triggered by an incoming phone call. It can be triggered because somebody sends a RESTful web services call to it. It can be triggered because it's on some sort of a schedule. And it's Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I want to launch this snap-in. It can be triggered on an incoming SMS message, a text message. And so this is the way I've been building bots, is when a text message arrives into my bot, into the Breeze system or the Aura system, it will trigger my workflow, and I assign a workflow to a phone number. It will trigger my workflow to start to run. So I receive the text message, and then I start to dissect it and process it. So how do I dissect it? How do I process it? Well, what we've done is we've built Breeze implementations for all the technology I just talked about, WIT, IBM Watson, and then Amazon. So you can now drag those onto the canvas, and then all that processing that's occurring in the cloud, you can now bring that straight into your workflow. And I'll show you how that works in a second. So if I open these guys up, you'll see that WIT has a little WIT task that you can drag on. At the very bottom, Amazon has a Lex task. Now, Watson has a whole bunch of stuff because Watson had a lot of cool stuff that I took advantage of. So the conversations, what we've been talking about so far, that's the bot technology. But there's also other things as well. They do language detection. They do basically natural language processing. So not in the bot format. This is if you want to build your own bot without any assistance from anybody other than the NLP, you could do that with theirs. And don't do the conversation, and could save you some money, or maybe give you some features that Conversations or whatever their new name is doesn't provide. Watson tone, sentiment analysis. So like, what is this person angry? Are they upset? Are they disgusted? Are they joyful? Are they happy? And then Watson translation, which is really just language translation. So all these things can be dragged onto your screen to build an application. You can also mix and match. You can say, well, I want to take advantage of Watson's sentiment and tone detection before I actually send that off to Amazon Lex. And so you can do some interesting things by mixing and matching these guys as well. Of course, you need a Watson account or a Bluemix account, and you also need an Amazon account, but you can mix and match these technologies if your business requires that. So let's start with Watson Conversation. So you would drag this thing on there, and there's a few things that it needs. And hopefully this isn't too geeky. The first part is really you need a user and a password for the user. That's your basically who am I on IBM. I need to make sure that I'm allowed to use this. Workspace ID, I'll skip for just a second, and then conversation. And that's really just the text. So I can take the SMS message, launch my workflow. I can immediately just send the incoming text right into the conversation, and then that will send that up to Watson. Watson will parse it, and Watson will send back its answers, and I'll show you that in a second. This thing called Workspace ID, and this is how you identify what Watson application you are tied to. So remember when I told you build an application, or what they call a workspace? Well, when you build that workspace, it gives you an ID, a workspace ID. You will take that ID and you would put that into your workspace ID. So that's basically the glue between the Breeze task and then the Watson bot or conversation or assistant that's running up in the cloud. So this is how you connect the two of them together. So incoming text message populates the text field, send that off into Watson, and then Watson comes back with some what might be gobbledygook if you aren't a programmer type. It's called JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation. The really cool thing is that you don't have to worry about this. Breeze gives you some really powerful and cool parsers that say, well, heck, the intent of this was hello. You see the word hello, I highlighted in red, and that's the intent. Interesting, the confidence. I am pretty darn sure that I've got it right. So 0.92, that's almost 100% sure that this is a hello intent. The text that came in was a very good morning to you. So this is what I typed into my bot. And I did it as an SMS message, and I sent that in to, I texted it in. Breeze grabbed the text message, sent it off to Watson. A very good morning to you. It looked at it, processed it, says, well, I am pretty darn sure that this is my hello intent. And the output came back and says, well, the programmer, me, Andrew, programmed the dialogue to say, okay, somebody said they lost their audio, but they said they're sure it's me. Okay, good. So the rest of you can hear me. So the text that I programmed into my dialogue is good day to you. Now, I could have just said hello. I could have said, how are you? This is me in the bot programming. So the user typed in a very good morning to you. The bot processed it, said, oh, it's a hello intent. The response that I would give back is a good day to you. Of course, that's silly. Good day to you. That's me being, very British, but it could be anything you want it to be. And it could have had multiple outputs. Now, I know a lot of you can't read JSON, but that's actually an array. That's an array of one element, but it could have had an array of multiple outputs. So it could have had multiple things that I could have used, and I could use the sentiment of the conversation to decide which one I want to use. So Amazon Lex, the very same sort of thing. You drag this thing on, and then you would feed in the conversation or the text into it. So things like on this one has a little more complexity because Amazon made it a little more complex because you can actually put your bots in multiple regions and you can have different services, but ignore all that. That's really actually quite simple. If you look at the developer guide and you built your Amazon Lex application, you go, oh, okay, I get it. That's simple. The important thing I want to point out is this thing called message. This is the actual incoming text message. So I send the text message in, I send that off to Amazon Lex, and I have all the stuff that identifies what bot I'm trying to talk to, and it comes back and it processes it in a very similar way that Watson did, and I get the response back. Now again, Amazon has some cool things with slots and things like that, but the whole point is it will process it and send back the answer. WIT, same kind of thing. So if I have WIT, I want to have my message, the incoming message, and then my access. My access is really, you go back to WIT, and there's this thing called the server access token. You would put that in there, and boom, you're all tied together. So again, I'm connecting my Breeze application with this cloud service. Now, all the glue, how do I get to WIT, and how do I do all that's all done for you within the task. All you do is just fill in which application you're trying to talk to, and what's the text I want it to process, and then it will come back and it will tell you what it just found. So my methodology for building text bots with Breeze. So invoked on an incoming text message. So I build my snap in and I would say, I'm launching this thing on an incoming text. Now this is my little secret sauce, is I want to manage some sort of context. So because I'm going to get a text message, and then sometime later I'm going to get another text message, and then another text message, and another text message. So I want to use this to build a conversation. Now let's extend this to I have thousands of people sending me messages. How do I keep everybody straight? Well, I can use context store for that. That's just one of the one of the things that you can use with Breeze to manage context from one user to the next user to the next user. So I'm using context store to manage these sessions so that I know that when Andrew sends in something and I send something back, that I understood what Andrew asked the time before and the time before, and I keep my conversation straight, so I'm not answering Mary Sue with what I should have sent to Andrew. So some of the things I do with context stores, I check to see if this is a new session. I create a new session. If it isn't, if I haven't been talking to Andrew before, I use updates on the session. So as the session is progressing, I can actually store data that will keep coming back to me in my context and retrieve it for the next message that comes in, because maybe I've answered that question and he's asking the question again, and I go, okay, I got something going on here. Maybe I'm not giving the right answer, so I can maybe use one of my alternate dialogues. And then I can session timeout so that I don't last this thing forever. So when I talk to Andrew, I can say, you know what, my conversation really is going to take so long, and if I don't get anything after a while from Andrew, I'm going to time this out. So the very next time that Andrew texts me, it's a new conversation, and I'm not worried about what was happening before. Although I could if I chose to, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And then, of course, NLP, natural language processing, is invoked to decipher the body of the text message and come back with all the responses. So I can build a bot that basically uses Breeze to glue the text message, the processing of text messages to the cloud application, Amazon, WIT, Watson. Use the other features of Breeze like context store, maybe database lookups, other kinds of things, or I can use this to create a ServiceNow ticket. So Breeze, so I get an SMS message, I figure out blah 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 what's going on. Oh, somebody has a problem. I need to create a ServiceNow ticket. I need to do something, or on and on and on. That's the power of the Breeze workflow. But we're integrating it back with these cloud services. So my TextBot example, and I'm not going to go into deep dive into this. I wrote an interesting article about it, and I'll point that out at the end. But it's really not that hard. And once I built the framework, as you can see, if you can see well enough, I've got context store things going on in there. I'm using the ability to send text messages back to the user. In this case, somewhere kind of towards the middle at the top, I'm sending all this stuff to Amazon Alexa. I'm using it to come back and determine what the intent was, and then I can respond back with the message that Amazon gave me. If it wasn't giving me a message, like with WIT, then I would build the responses into my application here, and I'd create the dialogues here. In this case, Amazon can manage the dialogues for me, so I don't have to put them into Breeze, and then respond back with the proper response, and then wait for the next text message to come in. Okay, and so this my little simple example is I can send in hi, and it came back and it says, before I can help you, please tell me your name. And I said, Andrew. And now I'm using Context Store because I'm actually storing this. And I go, hi, Andrew. I can help with store locations and hours. And then I wrote back and says, where are you located? And to prove that I was pulling from context, I just went back and pulled the name that I just stored earlier. And again, these are all separate text messages. Once this is kind of your application gets a text message, does something, and just ends. Next text message comes in, it finds the context and proceeds, and then ends. Next text message comes in, finds the context, proceeds, and then ends. So these are all separate sessions with Breeze. So, and then it comes back and says, thanks, Andrew, we are located at, now this address I built right into my bot. And again, this is Amazon. Now what happens, and I could actually click on this because this is in my iPhone. If I clicked on that address, it brings up the mapping application. I instantly got mapping for free because I'm integrating this back in again with the text message system. Are you open tomorrow? And it goes, thanks, Andrew, we're open, blah, blah, blah. This came from the bot. Now, I could have had multiple responses. Are you open on Saturday? Are you open on Thursday? Are you open on holidays? Maybe they're different intents. Maybe they're the same intent with different entities. And then lastly, are you open on holidays? Thanks, Andrew, we were closed on Christmas and holidays. So I had 3 intents here that I'm processing. One was location, one was hours, and one was holidays. So once I've done this, these are some of the other things that you can start to do with this technology. Well, this is, you can archive these conversations so that when this person comes in again, maybe next week, you can actually look at that information to determine whether or not that, am I answering the same questions? Am I answering different questions? You can use this to categorize the kinds of users that you have. I can do language translation, do these in multiple languages. So even if I have a language that the bot doesn't support, maybe I can translate it ahead of time into English and send it up. The sentiment analysis. This is interesting because I can maybe escalate to a human being when things go awry. And if you look at the first bullet, I've archived the conversation. So when I go to a real human being and I move this conversation, dynamically, the user maybe doesn't know anything has happened. I've gone from a machine to a human. The human gets what has happened to this point because I have archived the conversation. I can extend this to email as well. I've been doing text bots where there's no reason why I can't do this with emails. I've already mentioned the service portal integration. So I can integrate with other applications like ServiceNow or other things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just this dialogue service. It can be integrated back with all sorts of things. I can say, open up a ticket because my PC doesn't work. And maybe it has to ask me a few more questions. Maybe it doesn't. But then it can come back and says, I've opened up ticket 45645, which is a hyperlink, which I can now click and then process and then see my ticket. So there are really a lot of cool things that you can do with this. So here's the call out. This is my call out to developers because I want you to know that this is new technology and we're looking for people that are willing to kick the tires. So easily, you can send an email to me. That's me, Andrew Prokop. Or we have what we call our IoT development kit, which is a fully equipped Breeze in the cloud. You can use that system. If you're interested in that, then you basically get everything, even though it's called the IoT development kit, because that's how it started. But we're packaging all of this technology into the kit. Or you can send an email to this address here, advisoryservices@aerosi.com. We are still kind of a bi-directional company. We're, ASI was purchased by ConvergeOne. We still have some pieces on one side and some pieces on the other side. And the kit includes 3-month access to your own collaboratory cloud lab. You get some assistance from us. It has some IoT things because that's how it started. But what we're doing is we're putting this technology onto it. So if you want to do a kick the tires and you don't want to pay for building out your Breeze system, well, you get this kit and you get all this technology, and then you go out and start building your bots, and you can now, building your bots in the cloud. Now you can integrate them back in with the SMS system, and then, context store and all those other things in the Breeze lab. The last big thing I want to point out is I've written extensively about a lot of this stuff, and I have some blog articles for both Avaya and on No Jitter. There's some of these that have videos that go along with them. So again, for your references, and you'll get the playback, and you'll be able to go to all these places. Or you can just simply Google. Remember Google, that's the non-NLP thing, and you can Google Andrew Prokop, No Jitter, or go to Avaya Connected Blog, and I'm right there on the main page. So Google Avaya blogs, and you just click on me and you find all these articles. So if you don't want to bother to type in these URLs, just search for me and you'll find all these articles. They're easy enough to find. And then that brings us to thank you. There are a couple questions that came in, so if you don't mind staying on the line for just a few more minutes. Some questions that came in along the way. Here's one. Of the 3, do you have a favorite platform? And I have to say the answer is not really yes, not really no. I found that WIT, again, that was the first one I started with, is really easy to use. And I could do things really quickly with WIT. It had some limitations in that it didn't build the dialogue, so I built those dialogues inside of my Breeze application, but it wasn't that hard. I would get the intent, and I would, in a sense, just build the dialogue off of that. I don't want to say hard-coded in the Breeze application, but the words were in the Breeze application. Watson and Amazon, I didn't have to do that, but I will tell you they're a little more difficult to use. Watson isn't too bad. Watson is like WIT, pretty easy. I thought Amazon Lex was a little harder to use than all the others to build the cloud stuff. There are quite a few moving parts to get all that stuff to work, and even though slots are powerful, there's a learning curve to figure out how to use them properly. So I would say that Amazon was the hardest to build the bot on, but once I figured it out, then it was okay. I get it now. So you just have to go through a bit of a learning curve. It does have some power the others don't have. It was a little interesting in that when you would deploy a bot on Amazon, it didn't actually immediately deploy. It seemed like it needed to go through some sort of server moving from one place to another. I had to wait a few minutes before I could use it. Not a big deal, but these are some of the things I learned. If I were to do something right off the bat and I wanted to play with this technology, I might just jump straight to WIT because it's so easy. Doesn't require you to sign up for, you don't have to put any money down. You don't have to do anything. There's no money you have to spend, again, on any of these if you're a developer, but you don't have to go through the process of setting up an account. It's really, really simple. So I might start with WIT, and then maybe I'd move to either of the other platforms. Another question. Oh, and somebody happened to notice on my slides the words Google. And why aren't you talking about Google? And the answer is because I haven't finished the work for Google. So that's another platform. Used to be called API.AI or AI.API or something. But Google has the same technology, and that's building text bots. So I've been building the text bots on the Google side. We haven't finished the integration back into Breeze, so that doesn't exist today. So somebody happened to notice that. Oh, and the last one really is just about, again, this is the last in this series. And thank you for liking this series. But there's you'll get an email with more registrations. We just, as we're moving from ASI Arrow to ConvergeOne, we haven't quite shut down. We need to shut down this series and start up a second series. So that will be coming hopefully shortly. And that's the end of the questions. I don't know if anybody else has anything, but it looks like nobody's talking. So thank you for attending, and I'm coming in right on time. I'm really pleased because I didn't practice this at all for timing. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Again, this has been recorded. You will get an email link with the recording. We'll also be posting this on YouTube as well in our playlist for the Emerging Technologies webinar series. So thank you for attending, and I hope that you folks are sign up for the next series that comes along. So have a great day. Bye-bye.